I'm Professor Jonathan Fisher, School of Art and Design, and also Logan's undergraduate research advisor. So I'm going to hand it over to Logan.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So let me figure out where the arrow keys are. Perfect. Oh, welcome in. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, you're just in time. Okay, so like Professor Fisher said, this is measuring perceptions of creativity through collaborative experience. And in short, this is a talk about collaborative art. So here you can see my abstract. This details everything we've gone through. Got it? Not to worry, I will catch y'all right up. So, my name is Logan Mosser, and I am a visual arts and philosophy double major here at Kennesaw State University. Now that means I'm doing paintings, sculpture, photography, but the type of art I want to talk with you all about today is collaborative art. And yes, I'm going to keep going back and forth here between the keyboard and the screen. So, collaborative art, in my eyes, is any form of art that involves creative expression with more than one person. And so painting with other people, it's collaborative art. Sculpting with other people, it's collaborative art. Even dancing in a group together, that is collaborative art. Any creative expression you do with a group of people. Now, I got my start in collaborative art in concept, creativity, and studio practice, and I definitely want to thank Professor Fisher. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. Taught this class and got me started on this journey in collaborative art. And so all of these pieces we did in the class, I wanted to do with other people. So this one up here, this is called Ringularity. It's a piece of white trampoline-like material stretched down with a weight, and then we roll these paint-colored marbles all the way to the center to make these really cool marks. This was a collaboration called Dubious Valentine, where me and some other artists made these pieces of a heart, put them all together, and it has the character of all of our work, but together there is something more than the sum of those parts. Now on the far side here we see King Midas's skate park. That one was done, but all of these boxes were unfolded on the parking deck floor, and we rollerbladed, skateboarded, zipped across it on scooters, covered in paint, and then folded up all those boxes to make this cool sculptural installation. But the piece I want to talk mainly about today, or the lineage of pieces, is Lascaux 3. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Lascaux cave paintings are these caves that we found in France with these beautiful paintings on the walls. Age after age after age of humans came in, made paintings, and then left. And then people came in, made paintings again. But when we found it, modern humanity, we were going in, looking at it so much, breathing all over it, touching it, that we started to wear away at the art. And so what we did is we built a mock Lascaux, Lascaux 2, where we could go in, look at these cave paintings, made in perfect detail, just like the original ones, without destroying the first rendition. And there we see why I called it Lascaux 3, because I wanted to do a project like this, where I could have people into a space, they could paint the walls, and start to make some sort of semblance of these types of cave paintings. And we're to come back to this type of collaboration. So moving forward, my collaborative art just exploded. Collaborative sculptures, doors, pictures, all sorts of different collaborative works of art over the past, what has it been, 3 years now? Give or take, yeah. And during this journey, I picked up some references, some inspirations that I want to share with you to give some context for where this work is coming from. So this is Alan Capro, an artist who staged what we call happenings. Now, happenings were basically a bunch of people got together and they did a laundry list of exciting, crazy, wild, wacky things. They would build a huge tower of tires and then slide down like you'd find on the side of a car. Tires just pop, pop, pop. They would wrap somebody in tinfoil and leave them in the subway to unwrap themselves. It's absurdity and craziness just for the sake of absurdity and craziness, because we need to remember how to play and how to have fun. Now, Dr. Rita Irwin is a scholar in the field of artography. Now, artography is basically the question of how do we do legitimate research into a field as complicated and vast as that of visual arts? How do you define art? How do you codify creativity? Those are the type of issues that artography deals with, and hopefully you're going to see that reflected in the research I'm presenting for you today. Now, on the topic of research, what are we actually looking into in the realm of collaborative art? You see in these in progress pictures, I can see my participants doing collaborative art, enjoying the experience, and over the time doing these works, I saw that there is definitely something there. Something is happening, but I didn't know exactly what that was. I see these participants growing bolder, more creative, more expressive as they do these multiple collaborations, but I wanted to know exactly what that something was. Enter Lascaux Infinite. Now, there is actually a reason it's called Lascaux Infinite, is because I wanted a collaboration that I could do over and over again, sort of a cookie cutter type thing, and this is exactly that. Lascaux Infinite has sheets up on the walls, tarps behind the sheets, sheets over this furniture, tarps on the floor, and once we finish collaborating, we could take down the sheets, put up new ones, and that opened up my space to be able to focus on the research. Because doing the research here is how we're actually going to find what is important to collaboration, what dictates do people grow in creative ways. We want to see actual evidence of creative growth. Now, the way to do that is a before and after survey. Before and after each collaborative art event, participants would answer these 4 questions. Now, all of these questions pertain to how you perceive creativity within yourself. And so, they would get this survey, chart, I feel this creative, then they would go to the collaboration, and then they would chart again on the same survey, how creative do you feel after the fact. Now, before we get any further, you will see that this is done in a fantastically tremendous space. This is over 400 square feet of painting service. Every artist I know is envious of my place that I get to create with my friends, and I want to thank my partner and friends who let me use their garage. Please give them a round of applause. I'm very, very grateful for them allowing me to work in this space. I truly could not have done it without y'all, so thank you for that. Now, before we dive into the data, I want to show off just my top 8 of the 36 works of collaborative art that we produced over the course of 4 Lascaux Infinite events. And so, please enjoy. Now, this is from the first event. I color-coded them so that I would be able to keep them straight in my head. You can notice the intricacy, the nuance. This is not something that could be created by any one individual artist. This is something that has to be made organically with a ton of people. This one is one that was draped over a couch, and you see that couch show through in the way that the design manifests. Now, we also had spray bottles. You can see this collaboration and this one take on a more liquid effect to them. That's because the way that we make the art, the spray bottles, the paintbrushes, all have influences on this type of art. And the intricacy and the uniqueness of this type of art is really where I think the value of collaborative art lies, in that you can't reproduce it with just one artist. You have to have the influence of all the fantastic participants. And I do want to give a thank you to my incredible participants. Some of them are here today. Thank you all so much for being here. We definitely could not have done this without all of your creativity and this upwelling of excitement and passion and artistic outflow that y'all put into this. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. And I want to show off real quick, this is what one of these collaborations looks like in a time lapse to give you an idea of the space. And so we see people moving all about back and forth. We have this rule at these collaborations, my participants hear me say it the whole time, nothing is sacred. You can paint over anybody's anything. It is truly a very free and creative, open, flowing space. And this is the result of that space. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the data. So, like I said, we had 4 Lascaux infinite events, and they were made up of this percentage of participants. So we had 17 people at the first event, 23 at the second and third, and then the 4th event was not a party, but an intimate get-together. And that had 12 people, and that made for a total of 75 participants, 75 people who gave pre- and post-surveys before and after the event. And that's the data pool that we are going to be working with. And so first we have, how creative are you as a person? This is our pre-survey and our post-survey. And if you're not catching the changes in this data, don't worry, I'm going to guide us through it at the very end. This is just to get it in your head. We have a pre-survey, to what degree can one become more or less creative? And then we have our post-survey. Pre-survey, how do you prioritize creativity as a part of yourself? And then our post-survey. And lastly, how useful is creativity in day-to-day life? Pre-survey, followed by our post-survey. So what are we seeing here? Well, I've broken the data into 3 main groups. The 1 to 4 range. People who answered with a 1 to 4 on the pre-survey, I would describe as perceiving within themselves a lower amount of creativity. So from the pre-survey to the post-survey, what shift do we see? Explosive growth, up to the 5, 6, and 7 range. And this was really cool to see. That means that somebody who walked into the collaboration feeling within themselves low creativity, after the collaboration felt a huge jump in creativity. They felt substantial growth, which is really great to see. Now, in the people who started in the 5 to 7 range, we see a small amount of growth into the 6, 7, 8, and 9 range, which is also really, really good news. We would expect that the people on the lower end would shoot up, the people in the middle range would grow a little bit as well. Where it gets interesting is the 8, 9, and 10 range. Now, most of these people, from pre-survey to post-survey, stayed pretty much the same. That said, there was a small but noticeable number who actually went down. And so what's happening here? The people who start with low perceptions of creativity, we see this explosive growth. People with middle perceptions of creativity, we see a small amount of growth, but the people with high perceptions of creativity, they stay the same or they lose creativity. That, to a collaborative artist, is worrisome. And so could it be that these collaborative works of art are actually withering people's creativity? Well, I don't really think that's the case. Being there at the end of these collaborations, the people who come in feeling entirely creative, they don't leave discouraged. Of everything I've seen of this type of space, it is a very uplifting, positive environment from start to finish. And so I have a different prediction. That said, I warn you we're in fact moving into the realm of future research, and so this is speculation. I predict that the people who started with these 9s and 10s in creativity are not becoming discouraged, not becoming disheartened, but after a collaboration, they're seeing all this different type of art that can be created by all these people, and they are seeing a raise in the ceiling of what they understand creativity to be. They're saying, oh wow, I feel confident in this, but look how much more there is to this work. But we will see in future research. That is what is in the cards next for this collaborative research. What we do have is the conclusions to be super excited about, that collaborative art does inspire creative growth. We have people going to these collaborations who are starting in low numbers and exploding to higher numbers. We have people who are starting in middle numbers who are exploding, not exploding, who are growing to further numbers up the chart. And that means that collaborative art is a valid way to increase your creativity. It also tells us that creativity is not fixed. Creativity is something that you can grow and develop by doing these types of artistic experiences. So my takeaway is to stay the course. Keep researching, keep exploring, but to keep creating these collaborative works of art. Now, if you want to look through and geek out with some of these references, I would love to after the presentation. This is super exciting stuff. That said, this brings us to the conclusion. Now, you can find some of my art on my Instagram. You can find all of my art on my website in this fun QR code here. But I want to, lastly, acknowledge all of you for being here. This is really a cool thing to see as a student researcher, so many people here to check out this thing that I'm doing. And I am truly very, very deeply grateful to all of you for showing up to listen. And so thank you so much for being here. This has been Collaborative Art.
Do you have time for questions? Do you have any questions?
In considering the pre-tested folks that were at the high end of the spectrum,
Yes.
I'm wondering if you've given any thought of, as them viewing themselves as singular artists, viewing I'm very creative as myself, how is this collaborative thing disconnect or a different in perception for what is now a new art medium where there's multiple roles? That's just something for you to think about.
No, absolutely. That's a really awesome point. And something I found doing these collaborative works of art is that when I'm working with people trained like I'm trained, so like people who are actively taking our classes, they feel a lot more pressure to make something that's finished, to make something that's complete. And this is not really that. I mean, this art is extremely process-focused. And so it's possible these people coming in at the higher spectrum in the pre-survey have a different conception of what this is supposed to look like finished. That's an awesome perspective, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
Where do you do these?
In my partner and friend's garage. Yeah, no, that's so. These are, I mean, if any of y'all would like to do a collaborative art event, we actually have one in connection with the PSA coming up this Friday at 12 o'clock on the greens. And so bring cardboard boxes, it's going to be a great time. But yeah, these collaborations, something I've said for a long time about this type of work is you can always find a space to do it. And I do not have a studio for making art, but I have tons of studios for making art. I have a house, I have a partner's house, I have greens, and so yeah, you can always find a place to do this sort of thing. Thank you, I appreciate the question. Any other questions? And please keep me honest for time here. I really have no concept of where the time is right now. Yeah?
What's your favorite painting? What's your favorite large-scale painting collaborative art event that you've done so far?
Oh, my favorite event. I thought you were going to ask me my favorite painting, which is super easy. It's the last one I showed of the fourth event. But what's my favorite event? Now, the interesting thing about being a collaborative artist is that when my participants come in, they're doing art on the walls, they're painting, that's their art. But the art that I'm actually doing is more in the coordination and the setting up of the environment. And so like when you think, oh, how did that painting go? That's the same way I'm thinking of how did that collaboration go? And so the second one I did, the Philosophy Student Association was all there. That was super cool. We got a lot of that was the green one. We got a lot of really interesting forms and a lot of interesting dynamics, but then the one after that, the blue one, that was my birthday party. And so it also had all this spraying with the spray bottles. It had a much more dynamic kind of liquidy take. And so it's really tough to say a favorite one because all of them, especially from the perspective I have of having seen these over the course of 3 years, they all have a really different take to them. But nonetheless, I appreciate the question. Yeah, it's a good question. I just don't really have an answer. Thank you. Yeah?
I'm curious about the relationship between the collaborative art and the survey. And I was actually thinking a lot about the Zhuangzi, like the piping of man and the piping of heaven. It's like the piping in the collaborative pieces is open-ended, but not totally open. Mm-hmm. It's still canvas, it's still paint, like there's still limitations. But it strikes me that the survey is much more narrow.
Yes.
Much, much more narrow. Like
Absolutely.
It's like a 10-point, Likert scale, and here's your, your perception before, your perception after, and I don't know. I'm just curious about that relationship and if you see a different version of, I guess for me, it's like, the art it speaks for itself. I don't need there to be research that tells me, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I'm
absolutely.
wondering what you think about, like, the connection or the tension maybe between the art itself, what you're creating together and that experience, and then the kind of, it feels like driven by necessity, like this kind of survey that's a lot more limiting in terms of how you can ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's so many cool places to go with this. And the artography with Dr. Rita Irwin that I was talking about earlier, that's all writing and thought in the vein of this type of inquiry, is that, yeah, I can get up and show you all these artworks, and, well, yeah, clearly creativity is present. And so we have that, but it's this game of figuring out how do we in a research type of way, how do we in a verifiable, replicatable way show that there was creativity here, because we're never going to be able to replicate any of these. What we can replicate is the space and the survey. And Professor Fisher and I can tell you, we went through a lot of different renditions of how to collect the data. It started it out, and a few of y'all were there for this, we sat on the ground and had a discussion circle before and after the work. And for those of you who went to these series of events, that wouldn't have been tenable because there were so many people. But yeah, there's very much a push and pull balance of how to research and fit it into a box that we can understand numerically, but this also fights against being put into a box. And so yeah, there's a very real conflict between those two. Great question, I appreciate it, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
So,
Oh.
as someone who did the survey a couple of times, I noticed you didn't include the written responses.
Yes.
Was there a reason?
Yeah, there certainly is. For those of you who didn't see the survey, there was actually written portions because I wanted to see more than just that number response. And the brass tacks reason of why that's not in the presentation is because there is so much time for the presentation. But that's the cool part about this, and where I said, like, continued research, here's what's to look into next. After this presentation, the data still exists, and it's still something that we get to jump into and look at. And so another thing that I want to do that's separate from even those written responses is a few of y'all were here for every collaboration. And so I want to look at, well, how do you grow from collaboration to collaboration? What do those numbers look like? And so, yeah, there's a ton more to do. And for now, this is basically just the start and the springboard into that other type of research. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I was just curious, so when you have these people come in, they're like set events, right? Like you invite certain amounts of people or like just invite people to come in. Would you say that you might see different results if it was like a spur of the moment with multiple people? Do you think it'd be different than like a set event?
So I'm really glad you asked that question. The short answer is yes, I do. One time in my life have I seen a spontaneous collaborative art event. And I'll try and tell this story quickly. Basically, for my birthday last year, actually, I said, hey, I'd like to just sit down and sculpt with my friends, the same friends who let me use their garage. And we sat down, we were all sculpting, and Karis was making a mushroom-themed earring holder. And my friend Jesse looks at it and says, Karis, those look entirely phallic. They look quite phallic. They do. They do, and Karis says, and I'm not here for, I'm over across the table, so I don't see this happening. And Karis says, okay, well, let's do that then. And so they start making these forms, and then Miles looks over. There's no way Miles is going to miss this, so Miles jumps on it, and soon it passes all the way around the table. And we're all making these phallic forms. It's this garden. If you look on my website, it's under the collaborative art tab. It's called Toxic Masculinity. But it was a fantastic work of collaborative art. And to your question, yes, these events can happen organically. You have to have a setting and a medium for them. And I would really like to see more of these events happen organically, but you can't make that happen. It has to happen organically. But I'm really grateful to have that example to that question, because yes, they can happen organically, and it's one of my favorite collaborative art events I've ever been a part of because it happened organically. Great question, yeah. Any other questions?
There's someone back there.
Yeah,
Did you have
yeah.
your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the overlap between, like, if people came to certain events and what category would those, like, did they group themselves in? If the less creative people wanted to go to more, if there was any?
Yeah, that's a absolutely fantastic question. And I have good news and bad news. The bad news, we'll start with that so we end on a good note. The bad news is that I do not know at this moment, but the good news is I have all that data to be able to see. And so I guess the short answer that I can say right now is that in my experience, when people go to a collaborative art event, they do want to go to more collaborative art events afterwards. And so my prediction, without having looked at the data through that lens, is that we would see people wanting to go after going to one, but that would be a really interesting divide to look at. Do the people who had that explosive growth come back more than the people who had the small growth or no movement or movement down? Do those people stop coming after they move down, or do they keep coming back? That would be an interesting way to see what's going on there. I appreciate that question, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you plan on having any more collaborative art events in the summer?
No, never. I can't. No, I really feel like this is the type of art that I want to be doing right now. It's very, very exciting. You can see it's entirely fruitful in its creative output. And like I said, I'm going to send out the invite for this tonight, actually. But if you want to come to one this Friday, it's at 12 o'clock on the greens. Bring as many cardboard boxes as you can, and you'll actually get to see what this experience looks like. Because seeing what this experience looks like on the screen versus being a moving part of this artwork as it forms, it's miles and miles apart. It is completely indescribable. Yes?
To help prep for your Friday event, go to the bookstore, the KSU Center, ask them for shipping for extra box material.
That is the comment of the day. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Very cool. Yeah, that I will do. Awesome. Yes?
Also for extra cardboard, you can go down to any liquor store and they will give you the boxes.
Yeah.
Very cool. Good, good, good. Yeah, I will definitely be doing that. Thank you all so much. And if you're coming to the event, bring cardboard boxes, please. That's the, yeah. Any other questions? And like I said, please keep me narrow on time because I'm not looking at it here.
You have 5 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. Yeah.
You thought about measuring like brainwave activity, like before and after these events?
I have not thought about measuring brainwave activity before and after this. That said, yeah, I bet it would be really interesting. I mean, being a visual arts and philosophy double major, brainwave measurement is a little outside of the realm of what I've been exposed to thus far, but that's something that really excites me, is how many different doors are open to this type of research and what collaborative art brings to the table as new and nuanced forms of doing this research in the realm of researching the attribute of creativity. And so yeah, in the future I could very much see it having those sorts of elements that just right now I don't even know to ask the questions about. Absolutely. Yeah. Any
It's
other?
collaborative.
Huh?
It's collaborative.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it very much it requires a bunch of people and ideas that I just don't have yet. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yes?
How would you, I'm trying to form this question.
Hmm.
Looking at this from your philosophy view lens, how would you think of this collaborative art based off of that?
It's, well, and like Dr. M was talking about in questions, there are all sorts of different ways that this type of thing comes up. And so just as an example that I found prevalent, this semester we've been studying German Romantic fragments, which is basically to say writers collaborating on a book, putting a bunch of short fragments in together, and they're basically seeing how these different fragments interact. Philosophy seems to me in some ways to view itself as this sort of ongoing collaborative endeavor, in that the philosophy of one writer influences the philosophy of another, the philosophy of one author influences another author, and art views itself the same way. I think this is a more real-time representation of what's been going on in creative realms like art and philosophy this whole time. And so we're seeing these interactions of different people to where in a collaboration you can't just work on your own thing. If you get up to go to the bathroom, somebody's going to go and make it something different. That's how it happens.